Anton Corbijn made his first breakthrough as a musical photographer in the early 80s, mostly working for New Musical Express, one of the most important musical magazines of the time in London. And
well, I think it was the most important music magazine in Europe.
More than the Rolling Stone?
The Rolling Stone is America.
Yeah.
In Europe, you had the NME, New Musical Express. Like from the late 70s to sort of the mid 80s, that was the leading music magazine.
And then this collaboration ended in the mid 80s already. But in that time, you made a lot of photographs of musicians, I guess. So that was your main job.
But it was a weekly magazine, so the turnover was huge. The amount of articles that appeared, and when you're the main photographer, there's a lot to do. And through that magazine, I actually met a lot of people I worked with later, like U2 or Depeche Mode. But like people like Tom Waits, I already met when I lived in Holland and did pictures for a Dutch magazine. But also in the 70s, I already had pictures published in Rolling Stone magazine and some others. So I'm not sure if I ever broke through, but if I broke through, maybe in my eyes, to have a picture in Rolling Stone in the 70s was a major thing for me. There was the picture of Steely Dan. This was, for a magazine, and Elvis asked me to come to his room. This was his hotel room, tiny. I used a very wide lens because I stood with my back. I stood actually in the dressing, in the cupboard. That's how small that room was. So yeah, it's my pictures are slightly spontaneous and slightly arranged. That's the mix generally. But I was very influenced by reportage photography in the 70s. So that's still an attitude I carry with me. And this is one of the very few pictures I took of a musician with an instrument, because I thought that was the most predictable thing. Early on, what I wanted to do was to photograph musicians as people. So this is a photographer of a musician, really. So I want to photograph them as people, so anybody could identify him with, if you like the photo or the person. And I wanted to take it out of that context for music and put it elsewhere. But this picture, that of course I failed miserably in that sense. But what was good about it is that it became an incredibly famous picture. It's also published actually in Rolling Stone, and Elvis made it the cover of his
Elvis Costello
made it the cover of his autobiography, because he wrote in the book that after he saw this picture, he wouldn't have mind if nobody ever took a picture of him again. And he meant that in a good way.
For me, this picture is also very important, because that you can see in the film that we have cut from a big documentary that you can entirely buy in our bookstore, but there we have a 18 minutes shortcut. And there is a passage in it where the publisher or the editor of New Musical Express of that time, Neil Spencer, shows this photograph and explains, and I think is a very genius summary of what the style of Anton Corbijn, what makes it so different from other styles. He said this is a totally unglamorous mix of slightly arrogant pose and naturalness.
He's talking about the person on the picture, not me.
Okay, the person on the picture, So this is kind of an atmosphere that he summarizes geniusly, and that's basically the spirit of his images, and the spirit which made it so different. He says, that was completely new. I had to hire this guy. And that he did it against his staff. They didn't like what he did. They didn't understand why this Dutchman should make photographs for the New Musical Express.
I mean, I came from Holland, where, like in Germany, everything's well arranged. All the offices look neat. And you come into the New Musical Express, and it was chaos. Really. People had tons of magazines on desk and a typewriter somewhere, and he took me in that office where I heard typing, and he said, everybody, this is Anton, he's from Holland and he's a good photographer, anybody got some work for him? And you saw people looking up, and they go back again like this. and then one guy started saying, I hate the fucking Dutch. And I didn't realize it was a punk song at the time, but I hadn't heard it, but I took it very personal. And then, so I didn't get any work. And then a few days later, one of them rang me and said, well, a photographer can't do a job, can you do it? And it was Bill Haley, a concept picture of Bill Haley. So it's going back to 50s, in some small club. But I did it, and it was my first picture. And then some other photographer could do a job, and that was a proper interview with Joe Jackson, and I did pictures with Joe Jackson, and then Joe Jackson liked him, and then he asked me to do a picture with him. So it went very fast.
It was of course. And but I think this mix of slightly arrogant pose and naturalness, this is something that is so well expressed in this picture, and it captures so densely and so concentratedly what makes the difference of your photographs. And actually, this difference fell into a situation that was requiring a different thing. Bands like U2 and Depeche Mode, they were looking for a new image that would differentiate them from the classical rock bands, and that was it. And they didn't feel immediately easy with this. They didn't. There's, for instance, also in the documentary Bono, who said, when I met Anton, I asked him to make me look tall, skinny, intelligent, and with a sense of humor. You know, maybe you have seen photographs. He's not at all tall. He's
he wanted to look like me.
yeah, that's what you said.
I think he also said handsome.
Handsome, handsome.
But Bono usually likes his pictures better a few years after I take them. He grows into it. Yeah.